Hello, welcome to this very special edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at BB King's in New York City. 1973 was a very pivotal year for jazz drummer Billy Cobham, and he released his very first solo album, Spectrum, on Atlantic Records. And what he did was he continued the jazz, rock, fusion idiom of jazz drummers, which one of his contemporaries, Tony Williams at the time, did with the Electric Miles period. Billy Cobham is really steeped in the tradition of jazz, backing the likes of George Benson, Shirley Scott, as well as Horace Silver. Tonight here at BB King's, he is playing selections off Spectrum, and he's revisiting the music with his very special all-star band, including Mr. Gary Husband. We sat down earlier and we talked about this album, how pivotal it was for fusion jazz in the mid-1970s, as well as talked about his origins growing up and how he was exposed to the jazz idiom, not only through his father, but also the musicians that he played with growing up. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Billy Cobham and the All-Star Spectrum Band live here at BB King's here in New York City. Mr. Cobham, this is an incredible milestone for you and the world of jazz. Tonight is the beginning of your anniversary tour for Spectrum, and this pretty much was the catalyst of the beginning of your solo career.
Exactly. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that it was a beginning until 6 months later when somebody said, "Yeah, that's a good record." And I went, "Oh, thanks, man." But I thought he was referring to something I had done maybe with Milt Jackson or somebody like that up at Rudy Van Gelder's, and so I'm just going, "Yeah, okay, thanks." But I never thought about it anymore. And then over a certain period of time, people said, I kept finding other people going, "Oh, Billy Cobham, you wrote that at the Stratus and Red Barn." I said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I said, "Oh, it's on the radio." I said, "What radio?" I hadn't even, because I never listened to the radio because I'm always in the studio. So I'm just thinking, radio, me? They must have this wrong. That's good jingle. So I thought it was one of my tunes or two of my tunes were used for jingles. I still didn't even know until Mark Myerson got a hold of me. He was the head of A&R at Atlantic. He said, "Hey, Billy, Mark Ryerson here. You know how well the record's doing?" And I said, "What record?" And I said, "Oh, you mean my record?" "No, man. Why? I got a couple of albums. I gave one to my mother and one to my father, and I got one. Why?" I'm not thinking about. And he said, silence, and he went. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Man, you're number 32 with a bullet in the Billboard charts." I said, "That must be a mistake, man. Why would it be me?" No, maybe it's a mistake, right? He said, "No, I'm going to send you over the press." And I'm saying, "You're going to send me the press? I'll come and get it because I don't believe it, you know." So I came and I started looking. There's a whole table of press and stuff, and I'm going, "Well, why didn't somebody tell me before?" He said, "We've been trying to find you." I said, "I was in the studio. I'm here in New York, man. Where you going?" And he's like, "What?" "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I was working for Rudy and the usual suspects, Ron, so, but we're just playing around town." And he said, "No, you can't do that anymore." And I went, "Okay." And it started. And he started to bring me up to speed, and I'm going, I didn't know that. Then I started to wonder, what was it that got me into this position? And in breaking it down, it had to do with a lot of the how can I say, the groundwork that was done over 2.5 years with Mahavishnu. And so naturally I had an audience, and I thought about that at the beginning, but I didn't think it was like that, to have a bullet on the charts, and come on, no way. So, I said, well, let's enjoy what we can, tomorrow somebody will come and say, "Man, that was a dog, man." You never know. And I go, okay, now that makes more sense.
Going into recording Spectrum, what was it musically that you were thinking about? And you had Juan Hammer, you had quite a few people. You had Joe Farrell.
Yeah.
You had quite a few. You had Ron Carter,
Jimmy Owens.
Yeah.
Well, see, that whole scene came about, and that was the paring down, and what I ended up in the process that went on the record. But candidates for that record in my mind went all the way back to Oliver Nelson, where I talked to Oliver about producing me, and Oliver left us in '76, but I always wanted to work with Oliver. I worked with him at the Kongsberg Jazz Festival, and I think in the band was Randy Weston, and Azadine and Weston and all, these people, these were my idols, and I really wanted to work and learn, actually study with Oliver, and I never got a chance because he was super busy. Hence his passing, because he died from working, and so Oliver was there. He gave me the bug. He said, you should make a record. I said, I had an idea. I wanted to put it together, and we just never saw each other after 74, really, 75. And again, in person, but started with him. I met Tommy Bolin in 1969-70 with a band called Dreams. We had just come out, and we ran into him. He was in a band called Zephyr. We played. They're out of Iowa, and he played at the age of 19 or 20 years old, as if he was about 80 years old. To me, he had all of these traits of a young B.B. King who played all the right notes, uncannily at the right time. He knew. It rarely ever doubled up unless he had to. You can't find that in a 19-year-old. Unless that's all he knows. But Tommy could do a lot of different things. And music-wise, I would go, where did he come from? And Michael Brecker and Randy Brecker, and all of us would sit down and go, man, that can't. Barry Rogers, how? I had a kid that just wouldn't even come close. But it's supposed to be expected that kids that age at 20 years old, no chance. They're still trying to understand who they are. But not Tommy. Tommy was using an Echoplex. He was at the time, which was like it wasn't even a craze. People were afraid to touch it because they didn't know what to do with it. And he just played as if it was like a night at the opera, man. No big deal. At 20 years old, get out of here. You take him. The people that's one that I had to accept because he was just perfect for me. I needed simplicity. I needed synchronicity. I needed someone who respected me on and off stage. So that was a requirement that I didn't realize I was how can I say, presenting to many musicians, maybe in my body language. Because much of it's about music has a way of dictating who you really are. It never lies. And if you're playing only for yourself, it will sound like you played for yourself. But if you're playing for the sake of making a major musical statement as part of a group of musicians whom you like and respect, it will sound that way. And I found that more often than not, it's a lot fewer notes than when you are playing only for yourself. So I was looking for that, and I found it in Tommy. I found it in Jan Hammer, whom I already knew about when we were working together. So that was cool. So I had a keyboard player, I had a guitar player, and I had always toyed with the idea of using a bass player, whom I felt a tremendous amount of respect for, and I was curious about how I would match up with him. And I was toying with the idea of working with Dougie Rausch from Santana at the time. And I was toying with, because Dougie and I, when we played with Carlos Santana, we had a kind of a rapport that was held together by a little guy who used to be a flyweight champion out of Cuba named Armando Peraza. And he would he was like glue. When we played, it was like, and everything fell right into place. Me and Dougie and Armando. And we just sort of went everywhere together on the bandstand. It was just like it just flowed. And so I expected that I was going to do this thing with Dougie, and we did play with the Santana tour, and then something happened and Dougie wasn't in town. I think Santana was out on the road. And he actually was on the road with Larry Young and Dougie. And I only did a portion of the McLaughlin tour. So next thing I know is that I see Stanley Clarke, whom I was really intrigued with at the time, and because he sounded great with Stan Getz and Chick, and is somebody that was playing a million notes per bar on an instrument at the time that wasn't really designed for it. The strings weren't designed for it, and everybody was totally freaking out about the speed that Stanley had in his playing. And I thought, it was good for me to see. I can't use him because he plays more than I need. You know, more than I need. He had every note and more covered for my particular requirement. But I had no problem listening to him. It's just that I hadn't written anything for him. On my side, the reason why it didn't work is because I was so primitive in what I was seeking to attain as a writer at the time. I just wanted a groove. I wanted simplicity. I wanted to have air in between the notes, and I wanted people to kind of dance. And why I say primitive is that it wasn't as intellectual. It was what everyone would refer to as popular music. That's what I was thinking, coming out of a highly academic and intellectual band called the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And I felt that was a hook for me. Like, here's this cat that plays a zillion notes in this band, but he's laying it down in this band. And I said, I'd like to see how that works. And without knowing, it opened up a door that and set a model for a lot of people that came after me, including Stanley Clarke.
You're originally from Panama, but your family moved to New York City. And tell me some of the music that you grew up listening to, because you know your drumming style reflects that, and your past is heavily rooted in jazz. But there's got to be a lot of rock and a lot of R&B that you grew up listening to. You didn't?
I didn't listen to R&B. It did not turn me on so much at the time. It wasn't in the house. What was in the house was Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, Xavier Cugat, so many different Latin artists from Cuba, from Puerto Rico, from Venezuela. My father was really into that. Up until about 58, 59, then he started really listening to more and more to George Shearing, to Errol Garner, to, of course, Dizzy. He really enjoyed was it oh man, not Hank Jones, of course, Teddy Wilson, Hampton. He became friends with Dexter Gordon, young Dexter Gordon, of course, and you know, one thing led to, because they would go to the Red Rooster, and they go to a lot of places like this, and they get pictures with the jazz musicians there. That was in the days when people were dancing to that stuff, and they were rocking, you know, and so it would rub off on me. Also, my father really loved big band, and he loved the music that was played at the time on a radio station in New York City called WNEW. That was one radio station. Then there was another one called WLIB. And between those two stations, pretty much, there was music. There was a whole thing. There was a jazz station called Robin's. There was a DJ. His last name was Robin. First name I can't remember, but he had a wonderful way of being. How can I say? It was it was like a big jazz, and that was his call song, and of course you heard it late at night. You know, my dad would just be sitting there doing. You know, my dad was a piano player who never had a piano in the house. He just played everything by ear. He was a mathematician, and all of it made sense to him. You know, so he was a statistician who loved jazz and Latin music. Never listened to funk, never listened to rock and roll. He just didn't. He'd listen to Stravinsky, he'd listen to Schoenberg, he'd listen to all these people, and it all sort of ran around in a circle, but it was jazz, Latin, classics. Jazz, that was within the house. And then of course you had Basie until hell warmed over, or Ellington, you know, and it would just go all of Ellington, constantly listening, you know, Teddy Wilson, Bud Powell, all of this, you know, Charlie Parker. Those were the records we had.
So there was no popular music. This is basically how did you segue that into studying and beginning to play jazz music?
The thing is that was popular music back in the 50s.
Right.
And so people went to dances to hear Ellington or to hear Basie, who played as a dance band. You know, they played all that other people were dancing to that. And it was rocking, man. You know, and that was just the way it was. People went out, bought their food to the dance hall, and went and not just listened, but danced to that music. The ballads, the band was just over all the bands that they were listening to. And I only mentioned two bands. There were a lot of bands that came through that were just incredible. And so that's what my father would bring home. It's a lot of 78s from those guys, of course, you know, Ben Webster, you know, Coleman, Hawkins, and all that stuff was at home. All through, then the Europeans started coming in, Michel Legrand, and, you know, because of the piano, and he loved a lot of vocalists, so you heard a lot of different people, you know, Rosemary Clooney, all these kind of people was in the house. And then you had this huge tube radio that was like, it looked like you needed 8 people to pick it up, you know. But what a sound, man. And it was all mono, and the sound is just heaven.
This album kind of opened up Pandora's box for drummers all over the world. In fact, you've been hailed as the father of odd meter drumming, but you also at the same time invented a style called the open-handed lead. Why don't you elaborate on that?
Well, I blame my brother for this. When Wayne was maybe, 3 years old, I had to be 10. And one of my friends, Gerald, said, why is it you always play drums like, what do they call that? I said, it's called conventional drums, conventional grip. He said, doesn't that bother you? I said, yeah. He said, wow, there must be a different way to do that. Out of the mouths of babes, we're talking like we're some adults. I said, well, my father said that, that's the way you're supposed to play. He said, oh, okay. I said, but sometimes I go to Wayne and just to see if I would, what he would do with it. So Wayne was like 3 years old, and he was sort of hanging out, trying to hold himself up, whatever. So he still had rattles, and so I gave him 2 rattles. I said, you see? Here, take this. He said, And I said, okay. Yeah, take this one. I said, seems like we should be playing like this. With just like we used rattles when we were a kid. I said, yeah, and they never remembered. I mean, it's like, so it was just a conversation, but I remembered. And I went, I'm going to work on that. Because I don't understand why you should play on the snare drum in a drum set as if you were marching down in a parade. It didn't make any sense to me. It seemed so uncomfortable. So I started tinkering with it, and I realized if I do that, I have to alter some other elements within my musical sphere, namely the ride cymbal, crash cymbal. I have to sit a specific way higher on the drum set so that I can play the drums if I were having a dinner at the dinner table, just having a meal at the dinner table. So I raised my seat up. I found it was difficult for me to keep my heels off the back of the pedal because I was out of balance with myself. So my power source, which is in my tummy, was distributing a lot more energy than it needed to areas that did not require energy, just to keep me from falling off the seat. So I put my heels down, and the next thing you know, I became more rooted. I then played with the snare drum actually flat, as if I were eating cereal on a kitchen table. Just like a table, which is how we used to practice in drum corps, on a table, rather than make a whole lot of noise. It just cause everybody grief. We used to use plastic pads or towels when we were practicing for competition. And so I applied a lot of things that I had learned in the past in my limited time playing to what I was doing. I was seeking currently or presently at that time, which was how to control my rudimental presentation through the drum set. Not thinking about playing so much only jazz, but just playing or playing and sustaining myself. Then I realized, okay, now if I have that ride cymbal that was on the right on the left, and I have it next to the hi-hat, I'll need to lower the hi-hat if I'm going to, or if I'm going to keep my playing right-handed, which is how I started, I'd have to keep the hi-hat above my left hand, which I didn't like. I don't like cross sticking. I felt like it's a lot of energy wasted because I have to get sticks out of the way to play any patterns. So one thing would lead to another, so I lowered the hi-hat, I lowered the ride cymbal over the tom-tom, I put the crash cymbal on the right, and I just changed the face of my musical community to suit me so that I could more effectively perform and for a longer period of time because I was comfortable. And that's how it ended up with the bass drum, with my heels on the bass drum, playing from my ankles to the toes as opposed to the whole foot coming up and down. So it gave me more speed. Yes, it was painful because shin splints, and I was calling on muscles that I normally would not have called on. And that's how I ended up doing a lot of things that I do basically now. Then I added in this whole concept of choosing tonal positions of drums, multiple drums, but in specific places, to present a tonal array that would be a bit unconventional in terms of sound. But it was because I wanted to play those drums in those particular positions if I decided to play a roll across them, or I just wanted to choose a specific tone that would come out of the pan spectrum of your speakers if you're listening stereo, in such a way that you would not be expecting. Because I play from, if you listen from right to left, you're listening to the low drum on where the high drum would be, then another drum would be higher than that low drum, before there would be another drum that would be lower than the second drum, and so it would be low, high, low, higher, and then low, high again. So so now you hear, so it's like this, a wave, as opposed to.
Going back to Spectrum, you were performing these songs 40 years later. Mm-hmm. Looking back now, do you think that this record says a lot more where jazz has gone and where it's going, or do you think that jazz still has a way to go as far as the fusion rock and all the other elements of music out there, including world music?
I feel that Spectrum is just a small drop in the bucket of the American musical experience. Not just the Afro-American musical experience, but the American musical experience and that of the world musical experience. I feel that when I listen to music that's played by, my music played by, by Turkish musicians, by Indian musicians, I've heard combinations. Red Baron played by an Italian bass player with a Turkish keyboard player, and the drummer is from Mumbai with a Spanish trumpet player. And when you start to hear how each one approaches the music from their own perspective and from their own experiences, you realize, and it sounds great. It's just I would never play anything. I would not play my tune that way, but it sounds amazing that they would choose to do it that way. You realize that it's just one. And one piece or one little bit of music from me amongst hundreds of thousands of compositions that may be played by different people in all over the world. And the more extreme are the Asians, the Chinese, the Japanese who take this music and they play it more in a sort of duple play. And you realize, and they're in it for the long term, man. This is what they believe. You realize music does reflect who we are, where we come from, and how we want to go with it. You know, that's our history, past, present, and future.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at BB King's. I'd like to personally thank the legendary Billy Cobham for his time, as well as the staff and management here at BB King's. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.